All right, why don't we go ahead and bring in our guest this hour. In court, they're about to show a picture that we don't want to show on camera, so it gives us an opportunity to bring in our guest for this hour. That is joining us in the studio, trial attorney Miguel Custodio. Miguel, thanks so much for coming to Court TV and talking with us about this case in studio. We've been listening to DNA evidence that's being brought forth on the stand, but I want to ask you about this. So what we're taking away from this case from one of the people that have been on the ground, talking about the defendant and his demeanor throughout this trial, in particular, some of the actions of him recently while in court, and his hands are very fidgety. When you are working with someone, when you are talking with someone or inside the courtroom, talk about the defendant's demeanor, and how important that is for them to act maybe a certain way.
It's critical that you prepare your client to make sure that anything he's doing doesn't give certain signals to the juror one way or another. A couple weeks ago, I was on a jury, and I was a foreperson. And one of the things that a lot of the jurors focused in the deliberation room was how the defendant was smiling and laughing during certain parts of the victim's testimony. And that was something that really enraged them. And I thought, as a defense attorney, he should have really trained his client to act a certain way, to not be smiling, especially when it's the victim's testimony, not anybody else's testimony. It's the victim's testimony about how she got hurt, how he hit her allegedly, and he started laughing, and people really took it really bad. And so I think it's very important when you're sitting in that jury box, there's only a few things you're focusing on. You're focusing on the witness testifying and the prosecution and the defense counsel, and who else? The defendant, and obviously the clock. That's what they're all looking at. But when they were looking at the defendant, they just could not get over the fact that he was just a horrible person because he was laughing. And so it's critical that all the trial attorneys prepare their clients accordingly, because the focus is on that person. It's really on that person. And trust me, in this case, they are taking note of what's going on.
And I can't get over the fact that you were an attorney being a juror. People don't know how rare that is. Most other attorneys don't want attorneys to be on their jury. Let's talk about the DNA, though, in this case. It's a little bit complicated. Who knows which of these jurors are really following all of these numbers, but we're hearing the name James True. We are going to be hearing the name Lloyd Kelly, who we just heard on the stand via Zoom. Is DNA that critical when you know the state, it's not very helpful to them, because even if this defendant's DNA is there, this is his house, this is his husband, but there are foreign DNA matches. That's big.
It's big, and it's tricky with this DNA evidence, right? Because you run the risk, if you're the state, of confusing the jurors. Because if you have somebody who's dry, like this expert, they're going to get bored right away. And they're going to start hearing, oh, there's foreign, it could have been somebody else. They start thinking that. And then the defense, that's where they have to come in and start poking holes at the prosecution's argument, right? Because what's their classic argument going to be? That the state was hastily investigating this. They only focused on one person. There were other leads that they failed to follow up on. And so this could actually play into the defense's arguments. And so the state has to be very careful with this evidence, just to make sure that you're having the witness testify quick and you're out, quick and out. Because if you start really going into the details, you're going to lose the juror's attention, and that's not good.
Well, speaking of the details, what they were about to show in court was a sex toy that they swabbed for DNA. Let's get to our break, and when we come back, we're going to hear more of this testimony in the dosed and choked murder trial in Ocala, Florida. Now, when court resumes tomorrow, they are going to be presenting more translation evidence, recordings. Let's bring in trial attorney Miguel Custodio, who's with us to talk about that part of this case, because, Miguel, that was a huge part, that the defense is arguing or objecting to these recordings of the defendant, where he is allegedly saying, here's how I'm going to get away with it. My life is over if she is revealed as my girlfriend when I have a wife, I have 4 kids. But all of these translations, all the recordings are in Spanish, and these jurors don't have transcripts, but someone has translated it. Do you have any problem with how they're doing it in this case?
I do, and I think that's why the defense has done a really good job of making sure that their objections are very clear, laying the groundwork for a possible appellate appeal in this case, if it goes against a defendant. There's always that issue of how accurate the testimony is going to be, or when it's in a different language. And so especially here, when you have a jury that's made up of some people that are Latinos, and they I'm assuming they know Spanish, and it's going to, when they hear it, they're going to interpret it a certain way, a different way than what the other people, non-Spanish people are thinking of how it's coming across. So it's something that you have to be very careful. But the state is doing a really good job, because the transcripts, they're damning. I mean, they are like really bad. And so I think they know that there's a potential for an appeal down the road, but I think they understand how valuable it is, and so that's why they're going forward with it.
Yeah, it's a death penalty case.
I was asking you about the defendant in the Swilley case that we were watching. Now, this defendant, when we've watched him throughout the trial, he's taken a lot of notes. He seems like he's actively participating. What do you think of that approach from a defendant?
I think that's what you want.
Okay.
Because if he's just staring into space, I think that can lead different jurors to have different interpretations. Whereas if he's just writing, I think there's not too much you can take away from that. But I did see in an earlier segment of him kind of smirking.
Ooh.
And obviously that's not good. And as I said, the jurors are locked on this person, especially when there's a transcript. They're just thinking, how could you have said this? Yeah. And if he's smiling or he's smirking, that does not bode well for him at all.
We will continue to keep everyone updated on that trial. Again, the jury has gone home for the day, so no more testimony.
Still with us, trial attorney Miguel Custodio. Miguel, all right, so cross-examination here, and what we're hearing about are other individuals. And we heard defense counsel say this in opening statements, saying the state would have you believe that they thoroughly investigated other people and this is the guy. But defense counsel is saying, no, they did not do a thorough investigation of these other people.
Yeah, and he's doing a good job. He's starting to mention other individuals' names, right? You keep hearing a James True. And even if the expert cannot say that the test came back with any of his DNA, at least he's dropping the name there, right? And that is meant to plant a seed in the jurors' minds, like, wait a minute, there's somebody else, there's other people. Did they really do a good job? And so he's doing a good job of planting that seed of doubt.
And we just heard also Lloyd Kelly. He was actually someone who testified via Zoom. He said he didn't know either the victim or the defendant. He recognized some pictures of a room. His DNA profile is something that they looked at. Now, they did go and interview these people. They did go and try and figure out what was their cell phone location at the time. Do they have an alibi? Is that enough? How far do you have to go down these rabbit trails when you may have potential other suspects, but you have so much more motive for this defendant?
Well, in this particular case, the motive is just, it's really there. Right? I mean, you have killing for a life insurance policy. We know that Smith was going to be leaving him. He was the breadwinner. So I think that there's quite a bit of a story there that the jury can go back in the deliberation room and say, of course he did it. Look why. Look, you know, look at the details, right? But I do think that it is important for the defense to really make it seem that the state did not follow through with their investigations, because of course they're going to have DNA of Swilley in Tim Smith, because that was his husband. So I mean, I'm not really sure how much they're scoring the state is in this case on that.
Miguel Custodio, thanks so much for joining us in the studio. Always good to see you. We've got to get to a break. When we come back, though, the state's next witness is going to be on the stand, a crime lab analyst in the case against Herbert Swilley. He's going to testify about more DNA found at the crime scene. And you also see we still have the verdict watch clock going in that other Florida trial over the murder of 4-year-old Sonny Bell. 13 hours as this jury hung. We'll keep you updated there.